We have some middle schoolers who watch us. We've started, by the way. We'll cut out the first
That's
part.
cool. Yeah.
Just so you know.
We can crop around.
That's light work. I don't want to get up in y'all's business. But producer, what does that mean?
You know, it can mean a lot of different things.
Okay.
For most of the projects I've been involved in, I have been producer, either co-producer, like on Broadway, those type things. In those type situations, you can have a little bit of involvement in the creative process of a show, or no involvement in the creative process of a show. I've been to big meetings in New York with a table full of people, like 150 people around the table that are all co-producers, and
that's crazy.
and I've watched some really interesting interactions, and I decided in certain situations that I was not going to interject myself into their creative process, that I wanted to be the wind beneath their wings and trust the creators, right?
So would you say you're just like supplying money in order
You are.
for them
In
to
a lot of
create?
ways, you are really the wind beneath the wings. And you kind of, in my case, I've trusted a lot of different creative producers, right? People who are have done this for a very long time. And it's fun to watch them in their sweet spots and all that kind of stuff. I've also had the fun of, like, I have a very old YouTube channel, but I used to go in, like, there's one that I did behind the scenes of the musical The Prom. And so I got to film behind the scenes. So I was up in the catacombs and, fixing wigs and dancing with and stretching with the team, that with the dance captain, dancing with him, and just some different things like that. That super fun to do to promote a show. But really, I was just part of the promoting of it in that sense. But at the same time, I've also cut my teeth on, opening a show and closing it in one night. In Chicago, that was a fun experience. But at the same time, when you have to close a show, and that was an artistic team that went a little too far, and we had told them tone some of the things down, and instead they amped. And as a producer, you kind of have to make a decision: do I want to be attached to this or not? And another one of the producers and I sat down and said, shutting it down. In one night. And that's a lot of lost money.
There's when we were researching you, almost everywhere we go, you got two stalkers, just so you know.
We do our research.
Almost everywhere I looked, it was what was it called? At the Creative Arts Center that you funded, sponsored, paid for.
At UT?
Right. Yes. There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
School of Design and Creative Technology.
Yes.
That's a fun thing.
Yeah.
When you go into immersive art, and these are students who are incredible in their technology and their knowledge of technology. It's just a different use for it artistically. However, you who has interest in the medical world, what's interesting to me is how often things that are tried out in the arts end up with a crossover into something else technology-wise, right? And so that's what's been kind of a fun thing about being involved with the students at UT. I usually go to their end of the semester presentations and that kind of stuff, and I've seen everything from a Lamborghini made with cardboard and plastics, and then some kind of screens that they've put inside of it to make it, to literal race cars that were on the ground that we were racing, and somehow technology and art is coming together in that, and so it's always an interesting thing to go.
So that makes me curious. What is describe art? Because I think you go back 100 years and art is a picture on a wall in a cave, and then fast forward 1,000 years and now it's Picasso painting something, and now art could be a video, it could just be a piece of paper on a wall, that's abstract art. How would you describe art?
I think nowadays the crux of it needs to be evoking emotion and feeling. And so I think it can be anything from the storytelling of film, the even the way, let's just say, all illusions must be broken. If I were to look at different films that I've been involved with, and they may be documentary film, but the reality is that the artists that I work with evoke these amazing emotions in their audience to bring them possibly to a almost a philosophical crisis, if you will, of belief or disbelief in something, you know. So I think art has everything from painting, drawing, fine art, to experiential art. My personal art, for me, I have two different ones. One's writing. Another one is encaustic art. I work with beeswax and tree resin and a torch and create art. And that,
That's so cool.
that is something that I was going in for extensive leg surgery. And so the Saturday before my surgery on Monday, I went to an all-day workshop on encaustic art and set myself up to do it while my leg was healing, you know. And so that, but it kept my mind engaged. It kept me engaged. I wrote a lot during that time period and everything too. So, I mean, film, I had this absolute love for live theater and live art as well, because I love to watch the audience react to.
You're the same way. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I know what you're saying. Yes.
And so,
Yes. Okay, cool.
and so like when I did the prom, I had the joy of when we had the first full viewing of it was what we called the out of town opening. The out of town opening was in Atlanta, and let's just say 3 rows up, a little to my right, was Tyne Daly, who's a very famous actress. And so I enjoyed not only watching, because it was so well written, so funny and tear-jerking and heart emotion, felt that was it, watching her, because I wanted to know what her reaction would be to seeing this for the first time, right? So there's that so when it evokes emotion, when people connect to something so much that they have a true reaction. I just tapped my microphone, sorry. But if people react emotionally, they cry, or they laugh, or they just go, wow. You know, I thought one of the most interesting things, because the film version of The Prom, but the live version, I mean, the writing was impeccable, and the timing of how things were delivered. They had the audience in the palm of their hands. They go to intermission, and there's this moment where someone is left alone. People have pulled themselves completely away, and they've bullied this individual to they're alone. And that's intermission. Brilliant on the writer's part, because everybody in the audience is then sitting there in that emotion for 20 minutes of, have I ever bullied anybody that way? So to watch art be used in that kind, in that sense, is it's brilliantly done.
Right,
Yeah.
totally. I mean, for the audience, you probably don't want it to end, right? You're like, oh, I'd gladly skip intermission.
And then wisely, at the end of that show, it's joy. So they leave their audience with this incredible. So, I mean, it's like Sunset Boulevard is playing right now on Broadway. A retelling, reimagining of the way that story is told. But the tech has the entire show done in grayscale. So there's really no, there's no costume changes. And when there is a costume change, it's used as a character. The scrim and the screen that is used in Sunset Boulevard is a personality. It plays the part of a person in the show. And so when you're sitting there watching, something like that the audience is, I mean, there are people on, some of the actresses are carrying cameras around, and when you're doing that, when you're talking about telling a story, people who are on theater stages have to look a certain way to the audience. But if that camera's in your face and you're doing this, you also have to look good on camera, right? So the whole casting of that's a very different thing, and the way they use the technology.
I think it's like having all of it in grayscale is like, color is kind of vital to the way the human brain processes, and it also keeps our attention. I mean, like the red sign behind you, I'm like kind of looking at that half the time. And so you have to draw people's attention in a completely different way. Like the story has to be moving, or there's got to be like some crazy backflip on stage that's like keeping people like interested, because there's no colors, right?
And then the red hits the screen, and that's the blood. And when that happens in Sunset, you just go,
whoa,
your eyes, just your body reacts to the whole, this introduction of color.
That's so cool.
That's crazy. It's crazy how art combines like so many different aspects of everything.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't even think to like, oh, let's like look at the science behind like people reacting to different colors, but then they're able to use that to advanced art, kind of like you were saying how like this like new kind of age of art being like in technology too is just kind of like it crosses through all kinds of things. It's so cool.
Yeah.
How did you get like introduced to being like interested in art? Because it seems like it's something you're very, very passionate about. So what was your first like
personal
introduction to it?
art when I was a kid. I mean, obviously I drew a lot, and I wrote a lot and created characters and things like that. And then when I first started in college, I know that I thought, I want to be in marketing and fashion merchandising. What I didn't like about fashion merchandising for me was that everything depended on what I looked like. And I am not that person. I'm just not. And so, but drawing the models was fun, and designing things was fun. Yeah, that was fun, right? That I loved. But then, I went down a path. I think that, but interestingly enough, I actually became a speech pathologist special educator. And that is really my concern for people, working with people and learning differences and everything. And I look at it now, and God prepared me because my husband, Carl, has Asperger's, so he is on the spectrum. So that training and that work that I did really applies on a daily basis, moment by moment basis, sometimes in my life. And so I've always been grateful for the years that I did speech pathology, special ed, worked with the visually handicapped co-op, deaf ed co-op. But art came back in full swing for me when, because I did research work too in graduate and was published in a journal of education, and that was on character development and character traits and those kind of things. And so, anyway, and that was a really neat opportunity. I think I look at life as a portfolio.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
That's really, there are two things that I always say, and life is a portfolio, and successful people make other people successful.
Yeah, I saw the successful part.
Yeah, you have to give yourself away. You have to you have to teach people what you've learned, right? And so, anyway, I got a phone call one day, and I was starting to substitute teach again, just to kind of help the family budget and everything, and home educated for a while, and I got this phone call, and they said, "Hey, Nelda, our art teacher just walked out the building in November, and we know you do art. Would you like to come interview?" And so I had just been published, and I had the joy of speaking at a teachers conference in DC on character development. Anyway, and so I went in and interviewed it for it, and I loved it so much because it was first grade through fifth grade at a Title I school. And what I loved about it was that it just had this immense amount of freedom to it. And it was just fun to watch kids create. And some of the kids were so impoverished from where they had come from before that another thing that was really interesting to me was to teach them to observe the world around them. Because one thing I just, really realized is with poverty, when everything is completely hand to mouth, there's just very little chance for observation and just enjoying the world around you. And so that was one of the things I did, was had the kids create nature notebooks, is what I called them. We'd create those, and then we would go out exploring, and we would draw what we saw, and we would learn, But then that gave me opportunities to teach them about chlorophyll, and about, all these different processes in nature, right? That to reinforce science, to reinforce literature. We would do the Chronicles of Narnia. We would do this big multimedia project for them in 5th grade for the Chronicles of Narnia. And so I would choose opportunities to incorporate different parts of their education academically into the arts.
And I wish I was your art student. Holy cow.
It was so much fun. I will say that. It was just a blast to teach. And it didn't feel like work.
That's good.
It didn't feel like
That's good.
work.
I think everywhere I looked, I'd find what you do, and we help young creatives kind of figure it out and tell their stories or create their art pieces. This is what we do, and this is how we do it. But everywhere I looked, I never found why you do it. Why do you, as somebody who's also creative as myself, I'm wow, this person's sick. You're helping other people be creative. But why do you want to help people be creative? Why are you concerned about their creative process?
I don't know that I know any other way to be.
Oh, okay.
I think that when I started working professionally teaching art, I went ahead and added art to my certification process for teaching.
Okay.
And I found the most creative spaces to be where children were involved. And so I really, right now I work with Austin and National Angels, the National Angels program. And I work with them because they work with foster children. And I know that foster children move as many as 7 times in 2 years when they're first placed in the system.
Yeah.
And they're constantly getting behind academically. But if there's one way that you can feed somebody's soul, to me, is to be able to create. Because if it's music, if you can take a child who's in something like that, there's a lot of trauma like that, and you can get them involved with an instrument, you can get them involved with a creative process, right? Drawing, painting, any of those things, then they take that with them. That's not something that goes away if I have to move from one place to another, right? And so I don't know if I'm answering your question well, but...
I have a follow-up.
Okay, follow-up.
Why do you want to help people?
Why do I want to help people?
Yeah. Wow. Where does that come from?
That comes from Christ. That just comes from our Creator. If there is anything that is anyone who is absolutely creative, it's God.
Oh, totally.
I think when I think of creation, if you follow me on Instagram, the one thing that you'll find that in my stories on Instagram is usually whales, it's usually snails, it's insects, really weird insects. It's all these different people who do the macro photography, because I find it fascinating that we even need a giraffe weevil that has a long neck with it. It has, it has a, I mean, like,
right.
I mean, the exoskeletons show you the small, the small machines and all these animals, right? I mean, who isn't terrified of a praying mantis? But if you look at the way that its mouth is configured, it's a bunch of simple machines, right? And it's like, how can you think that
Yeah.
would walk.
Your awe is so pure. Like, you're just like, wow, look at that.
That's just incredible.
Right.
And so it just, to me, the whole concept of the world around us is, I understand the scripture when it says that God displays that he's here in everything that we see. Come on, even leaves. And the fact that we now know that trees communicate to each other through their root system, and that so do fungi. And so, the very fact that this earth was created to communicate, and the fact that communication was broken through the fall.
Right.
I mean, I can't imagine the devastation of the fall. Because here you've got Adam and Eve using their complete and full brain.
Right.
Probably the only individuals ever walk the face of the earth that use 100% of their brain, right? Because there is no death, there is no decay.
Yes.
They walk with who? God.
Right.
They walk and talk with God on a daily basis.
Right.
And so the fact that their full brain is being used, what would God teach you? If you had just created all this, what would you teach them? How about biology?
Right.
How about the stars? How about the fact that he named each of he knows the stars by name?
Right.
Do you know how many stars there are out there in the
Way
universe?
too many.
Okay, and so the Creator, to me, when people talk about life after death, I think we'll be creating, because the Creator, we're following his footsteps, right? Christ said, I do what I see the Father do, and you do what you see me do.
Exactly.
The creative process of that is just, right?
I think what fuels your creativity is just like your awe. Like, like you're not just inspired when you go see like this cool film or like somebody's cool art piece. You're like, dude, the trees give me, like, the trees inspire me.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that's so cool. There's like so few people who are like, yeah, like everything around me is like really cool. It's like, it takes some like magical experience in order for them to be inspired. I think, or like they have to be convinced to be inspired, or there has to be like a paycheck behind it in order to be inspired. And you're just like, leaves are really cool. Like fungi, bro, those are cool.
When I was a kid, my mom used to say that I would disappear at lunchtime or whatever, and she would think, where'd she go? And I would always have taken part of my sandwich and gone out to the ant pile. And I would go to the nests, and I would lay down a piece of bologna. And I would watch them, because it fascinated me to see their nests. And, of course, these are stinking fire ants, but whatever. I just thought it was always this fascinating thing. Cool. And someone asked me one time, what was your safe place when you were a kid? And I thought, wow, we had a mimosa tree, and the mimosa tree has these pink little bursts of flowers, right? And there would always be sugar ants of some kind in a mimosa tree, and so I would sit in the mimosa tree and draw or write or whatever, and that was my safe or place. It was just the place I loved.
So, what do you think people, not people, how do you think children's creativity is being affected because of social media? Like, I'm looking at your life, and you're like, I went and sat in a mimosa tree and I drew pictures. Like that, like personally, that sounds like the life. Like you just go watch fire ants devour this piece of bologna and like tear it apart. Even though that's so simple, that sounds amazing to me. Like, I'm like, oh, I want to go see that. But now, like, I'll walk into like Two Rivers and I see a kid on their phone and they're clearly scrolling. What do you think? What do you think's like happening there?
I think that I think it is the enemy of being bored and pondering and just being in touch with nature in and of itself. I know for me as a kid that would have been so devastating, because I was one of these kids that was out on the bike and down by the creek and, running from water moccasins and, watching hornets and wasps build their nests and fascinated by the honeybees at the flowers. And so I think someone recently said that I was idealistic, and I stopped for a moment. I said, well, that's a good thing. Maybe I am. Not that I haven't, because I also, as an adult, I can look back and can say that there's a gentleman called Joseph Campbell, and Joseph Campbell talked about people having the hero's journey. And it changes you to have the hero's journey. But part of the hero's journey is you have to face death. And I have. I had a situation where emergency situation where I should have died. And God kept me alive. And I can say that, that I know what it's like to face respiratory failure, and I know what it's like to maybe live and move through something that you don't even know that you lived and moved through at the time or the moment. But looking back on the grace of God, I'm here, Anyway, so I think the devices today, they have their place. The problem is, like just recently, I just bought a free writer, which is a typewriter with a paperwhite screen and the keys like a Why did I do that? Because when I'm writing my book that I'm writing right now, I don't want to be disturbed by the internet. It's real easy for me to write on my notepad. It's really easy for me to write on my phone. That's a fast, easy process for me. But as soon as something pops up, and unless you can shut down every single notification, then you get distracted off into everything.
It disturbs the productivity.
And it's all fascinating stuff, right?
I think I'm always so much more creative when I don't have my phone on me, or when I'm not on, I don't have social media, so my only social media is YouTube. When I'm not on YouTube, I'll have so many ideas. My video notebook is flowing with ideas when I'm out camping for a week, or when I'm out traveling, because I'm not hyper obsessing of what's on my phone. So I think that boredom, there's something special in that boredom, because it forces you to think, because you have nothing else to do, right? This thing just allows you to not be bored.
Right.
So.
And you're talking about how creation feeds the soul, and how creating an art, and you're just so much more observant whenever you're not stuck on your screen all day.
But it has to be a decision you personally make to detach yourself from it. I think that I can understand how some creatives, there are certain things there that are super creative for them. But I do believe that we also get so distracted. There's never been a time like this age has been on the instantness of news. Just instantly before anybody even thinks about it. Whereas when you think about generations past, there'd be a war going on somewhere, and these people on this continent have no idea that there's a war going on, right? So, but yet, too, I think I see the panic. Today I see a panic in the political process in particular that is kind of, to me, I just turned 62. So it's humorous to me to see the panic. I'm like, do you not know that these things happen? That this is part of the process of what we go through, and that most of that which you are panicking over is something that you have had no knowledge of in the generations past. But the same things occurred. They just weren't aware of every single move that anybody made.
Because I think of the times when there's always those conversations in public schools, do we really need history? Do we really need history? Because exactly what you just said, times repeat. This is surprising you. This happened 10 years ago, and it's happening again. You should know what next steps to take. So we definitely need history. So my sister just walked in, and that totally caught me off guard. I was like, oh, I know that face.
That's so funny, because just the other day which I don't do too much of, but I was watching somebody feed Phil, and he's in Scotland talking to, it's the actress, I can't think of her name right now, but she was in Harry Potter, but she was the voice of, Scottish voice, what is the Disney Scottish
Brave.
brothers with a Brave. Yeah.
Wow.
What's her name?
She was the voice of that character. It starts with an M.
Meredith?
Can't think of it. Meredith.
Merida.
Maybe. Anyway, she was the voice of that, and she's sitting there talking to him, and they're eating at a bakery, and in comes a guy with 7 dogs on leashes, and she goes, "Oh, my brother." The stick goes, "Oh, it's my brother."
Kind of before we started recording, we talked about you've met some really cool people,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
and you're kind of up there. Like I think it was you who told me, but you went to the presidential ball.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Inauguration, yeah.
Like that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You just said you were in Europe for. You met,
Oh, we have a.
You couldn't go.
I couldn't go because it was the girls'
But you
spring
had the
dance.
opportunity to.
But I could have been there for the opening night of Much Ado About Nothing, Shakespeare, with Tom Hiddleston.
Yes.
But here's the deal. You know, it's opening night.
Yeah.
They meet 1 million people. I mean, like opening night parties are like insane. Of course, my understanding is London's a little calmer than the U.S. But I've been to opening night parties and been, you know, I've met people like, you know, Stephen Schwartz and, you know, who's I'm doing a musical that starts next fall on Broadway called The Queen of Versailles. Yeah. So Kristen Chenoweth, you know, I've met her on a couple of different occasions and everything. And so they're just, you know, different people like that. But I always remember that they do put their pants on one leg at a time. And I always remember that, you know, that they've been blessed and they've been, you know, are successful. And that we in our world tend to really make celebrities out of entertainers.
That's where I was going to go.
And then we forget that engineers exist and that, you know, that people who are, you know, amazing in the medical world, we forget that. And so these people become, you know, celebrities and they are talented and they are amazing. But most of the time too, if someone does live theater, this is one thing I've found too, is if they do live theater, they tend to be kind of down to earth because when they do a show and it's that many weeks and that many nights and that much time together, you better be pretty real.
Right. Yeah.
Because if you're not, you know, you just don't get along with your whole cast and that's just essential is to know how to work because you're living with people through, you know, the great things of their life, you know, the hard things of their life and everything, but you're still having the show goes on, right? So you're still, so you have to be able to work with people, you know, and know that people have a bad day.
Totally.
You know?
Totally.
It's kind of like family.
Exactly. You got to live with them.
Yeah.
You can't just leave.
Yeah. I got 2 girls that are, you know, 12 and a half months apart.
Holy cow.
I know how close they
And they're
were.
teenagers. They're teenagers.
Oh boy. So I know Lily talked about like how did you get into art, but you're producing these huge, like we just talked about, shameless plug. She has a documentary about the identity crisis. Is that what it's called? You should go check that out.
Yeah.
On the Daily Wire.
On the Daily Wire.
On Daily Wire, you know.
So you have that and you're helping produce like other people's creative process and everything. How'd you get into that? Like that sounds like
My
that
daughter,
sounds crazy.
my oldest, who's an actress and a producer in New York of her own right, but she was a student at UT. That's how I kind of got involved with UT too.
Okay.
And so, and her mentor, Natasha Davidson, was at one time. Natasha was a I don't want to say news commentator, but she was the person on the camera. And so she did a fair deal of that, and she also then at one point in time in her career decided to become the white cat in Cats in Germany, and so she's an amazing dancer, and so she was my daughter's mentor. Wow. And Natasha just said, hey. So first I was invited to, there's a process with these shows that people don't know. I mean, it can be 10 years in the making before it ever hits Broadway. And so it starts out a lot of times going to these college campuses and they do readings And so it's not necessarily a cold reading. They usually do a little bit of a reading, and then they'll do it publicly. And it's a chance for the writers and the creatives to see how an audience will react to what they've written.
Right,
And they might pay the university a little bit of money, or they may just do it for free.
Right.
So that's what kind of started, was getting invited to these readings and things. And then, it was like, hey, there's an opportunity to produce this. What do you think? And so really, and that's when, the thing that opened and closed in one night, it's just all kind of the process of it, And so the prom came along as a result of Natasha's relationship with Dori Berenstein in New York. And then I've grown a relationship with Dori. And so, and then you just have people who bring you projects.
Right.
And so, and then you look at the project and you get to decide, do I have the bandwidth for this right now? Do I, is this one that I want to help produce but not really have my hands on it in any way? Do I want to go to readings? Do I want to see the whole process happen? I mean, you can really kind of be as involved as you want to.
Yeah.
And so I've learned that there are times when I want to be super involved.
Right.
And you just get connected to people who, like Bill Damaski, who's done so much through animation, trolls, these different things like that, and has had these, president of this, and you start, their career is very interesting, and then you build a relationship, and I think there's a lot of trust. I think there are people who look at doing something like that as self-important. Does that make sense?
Oh,
they really are
totally,
climbing the ladder.
Totally.
And I, you deal with a fair amount of those. And then for me though, it's never been about that.
Wow.
It's been about the work.
Right.
But it's not been about, and it's about the show, or maybe the story told in the show.
It's about what you're doing, not like, what will I get out of doing this?
Right.
Right. Okay, cool.
And so but I know for some people, because I've been in meetings with, like I said, huge table full of people, and you can just tell who it's about, what's about in their world. It's never been about being important as Nelda.
Right, yeah.
So,
interesting.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, totally. I would totally agree with you. There's like some things that I want to go do, and I'm just like, I just think it's cool. Like, I'm concerned about like how it comes together and like the story it conveys, or like whatever. And then I'm talking to the other people at the table, like you're saying, and I'm like, yeah, they're just doing this because like their name's on it. Like they get to be in the spotlight for a little bit, or they get X amount of money because they're a part of this, and it's not. It's not out of like a desire to do it.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, how can this serve me, not me serve this, right?
Right.
And so whenever I ever meet somebody who's like selfless like that, who are like, yeah, I just want to do it because it's cool, like not like, I'll get money out of it. So that's really
cool.
special. Like you're speaking my language. I'm like geeking out right now. This is great. So.
It's been really neat because you meet people that are giants and they're part of the industry or whatever, and but yet one of them might come sit down next to you during a rehearsal or whatever and begin to tell you, well, I'm one of 10 kids, or and you start hearing their backstory, and then you're like, wow, I didn't know that about you. I didn't know that because I always see you polished in your business, fantastic New York attire, or whatever, but I didn't know that you had this very humble beginning or whatever, and then because I think you always want to be a safe place. Christopher Cross, I met him too in Chicago.
What?
He wrote music to a show that early on that I did.
That was so cool.
What a writer. And so some of that is just like for instance, giving up going to London. Okay, I feel like I will be over in London before the show closes.
Right.
But it's never been about meeting somebody.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right, yeah.
Just because I can say I met you or I have a
Yeah.
picture with you
Totally,
or whatever.
Totally.
Because that just, and so I try to approach it very differently than that.
Right.
I think it's more about trust too, because if you know your place and you're not trying to be self-important in something.
Right.
I have been on a learning path for 15 years in this now.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And so now I'm restructuring my company. I will still have Nelda Studios, but my name Nelda means to enlighten or bring light to. It actually means light bearer.
Wow.
Okay, so the bearer of light.
That's a sick
And
name.
I find that lovely, but it also means, this is from one little obscure meaning that I read one time that said, of the alder tree. I thought,
Wait, say that again?
of the alder, ALDER, alder tree. And I thought, what the heck does that mean? So I looked it up. An alder tree was known, and this is historically known, for giving nutrients to other trees in its root system. Now, if you think about that, we are supposedly only have known for about 10 years that trees do that. So this is much more
Right. Oh, totally.
old information that, maybe got lost somewhere. But anyway, so I am starting Alder Tree Studios. And my visual is the tree, and the root system is really that graph of my different parts, like the foundation I'm getting ready to start, and that will be for the arts and for a lot of nonprofit work that I do. And then there will be the live theater portion of it. There will be television, and there will be film. And I think this 15 years has been another learning curve to get me ready
To
for
prep
that.
for,
Yes. And when I see the root of the foundation, what I see is the ability to wrap my root around, like here's the alder tree. You have a sapling or several saplings, and you're literally wrapping your roots around and growing those trees.
Right.
Whether it be a nonprofit, whether it be another film.
I think you kind of just answered the question I had for you earlier. Why do you do it? And you just said, it's kind of like ingrained in me. It's part of my name. And I think that's so cool.
I think it's God's purpose for me.
Yeah, there you go. That's why you're doing it. There you go.
Yeah.
So why do you like art? What about art do you like?
Well, let me just go first to my own personal medium, which is lighting up the wax, warming the wax.
Yeah.
So when I go into my art studio and I smell the beeswax, which has a very distinct smell, it's a very creative smell to me. It's warm.
Okay.
I also have a torch, so we have a fire. It's unpredictable. There's a certain, it's kind of like working with watercolor, that I always think that watercolor artists fascinate me, because to me it's a wild medium. It's unpredictable to me. To them, after they've worked with it for such a long time, they know what to do to evoke certain things in their art. But to me, like with the encaustic, it kind of involves all the senses. I think when we read Genesis, when you read the book of Genesis, very early on, it says there are the tribes, and there are metallurgists, and there are artists and musicians, and they are from the get-go. From the beginning of creation, there were artists. And I think artists have their place because for one thing, I know that I have a really strong gift of perception. So physical space, I can mimic things. I can even mimic other artists, and things like that. So I have a really strong perceptual skill. My dad's an engineer, so I also have some of that. What was I told very early on in personality tests? They would go, you're as strong in your left brain as you are your right brain. Are you okay? like, are you in constant conflict with yourself? And I would go, yeah. I make all kinds of lists and lose them. I made the list, but I lost it, and so what I have learned to do, and this is kind of getting away from it, but what I've learned to do as an artist for myself is I have a team of people. And they are my team. Like, there are people who come and clean my home. There are people who come and I employ them because they are so important to me at this stage in my life to release me to do what I feel called to do. I would be terrible at what they do. I really would, and I love them, and they are part of my team, and I treat them as such, because that is a job they want to do. It's a job that, whether they own the business of cleaning or whatever. So I feel like I'm at the same time giving them wings to do but their wings to do what they need to do, right? And so I have learned that about myself. I have to release my brain because my brain's all over the place. And
speaking my language again.
My dad used to say, God love him, he's an engineer. So, and he passed about 5 years ago. So I can say this, Dad, right? Anyway, he used to just say, Nelda, you better have a lot of team. You need to be, and there was a point in time in my life where everything was hand to mouth, and then I lost everything, and then I had to read. Let's see, how many years ago is that now? 15 years ago. That I lost everything. I had to find a new place to live. I had to, I lost my marriage. It was just, everything's gone, And so when everything was gone, that was when I walked to my thermostat one day, and I had been doing a little bit of just Bible study, and I walked to my thermostat to change it. The thermostat, and God clearly spoke, and I heard, you will be like Joseph to Pharaoh. So I went and sat down and I wrote it in my journal, and I dated it and timed it. I never timed anything.
I time everything. I time everything.
Yeah. And I thought, God, what does that mean? But in studying the life of Joseph lost it all. Joseph had the visions, and I know I had visions as a kid.
Oh yeah.
I was a weird Southern Baptist kid because I wasn't supposed to be having visions, right? And wasn't supposed to be hearing God,
that's so awesome.
And I wasn't supposed to be fussing about the devil interrupting me or whatever, but I did, and I was a weird kid, and so then when I wrote this down, I just studied the life of Joseph, and it's like Joseph had all these visions and dreams. God was clearly speaking to him and everything, and then he just lost it all. His brothers, he lost his family, right? Because his brothers threw him into slavery, sold him off. Then he gets falsely accused by a high government official in a situation and ends up in jail, right? And then they see his skills as a leader, right? So he runs the jail, which is crazy, right? And then interprets dreams because he hears God, right? And then the most interesting thing to me is I read this one time in the Catechistes. It talked about the shepherd kings. I don't know what in the world is a shepherd king. And apparently shepherd kings were, according to biblical archaeologists, they were men who ruled in Egypt that were not Egyptians. So they had conquered Egypt, and they were placed on the throne as pharaohs. But they were called shepherd kings because they were Semites, which is a Jew. So when Joseph is brought out of prison to interpret the dream for Pharaoh, it's a fellow Semite that he's standing before. That Pharaoh was a shepherd king, and when he speaks to the wise men of Egypt, tell them why they couldn't interpret his dream, he says God is with him. He doesn't say the gods are with him because he would be Egyptian, but he says God is with him, and that's how Joseph gets moved to the right hand of Pharaoh.
That's so sick.
That's crazy.
So God went before him, right? And so I think about that in my life. I think about the fact that suddenly I marry and I have the ability to do these things at a totally different level than I would have ever thought of in my life. And, just to be a good steward and a visionary,
Yeah.
and the one who can see, if I work with this nonprofit and we push that domino down, a bunch of dominoes
Boom.
fall.
Yeah.
Because they, and so that's how I kind of choose who I work with, to push down a domino. If God allows me to do that,
Right.
it's phenomenal. Whether that be with philanthropic work,
Yeah.
or whether that be with the arts, and that kind of thing. But it's being Joseph.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I don't even know what to say. I'm just like smiling over here. I have one more question. I don't know if you have more questions, but I hear this like kind of all the time. Well, not all the time. I hear it all the time in like a different sense, but I kind of want to apply it to art. What would you say to somebody who's like, art is a little oversaturated? Because, I mean, there is so much art out there. Like, how will somebody who's like, how will mine like ever get out there? I think there's a point where it's like, oh, if you're concerned about yours getting out there, you have the wrong intention as an artist. But like, I also think there's some validity in that statement. It's like, I want people to see my art, What would you say to somebody like that?
Visual art, man, is so much to do with someone's taste. Like if you ever came to my house right now, okay, you come in, my walls, everything's color.
Color. Yeah.
Color. Everything's color. Okay. And when I had the opportunity to remodel this home, I had worked with interior decorators before who wanted to tell me what I wanted in my home. And so then I found somebody who wanted to get to know me and find out what I wanted in my home. And that's a different thing. So I think art, as far as visual art is concerned, there is a lot to be said for the right person coming around at the right time. Like for instance, some of the art that I have in my home, I have a lot of original art in my home.
Okay.
One is an artist that I stumbled across on Instagram who had lost her tongue and her vocal folds to cancer. But her art is this crazy collage of color and beauty and and her voice is her art. Her canvases.
There you go. That's
are
like
her
the
voice.
Leonardo da Vinci quote where it's like, art is a form of poetry.
Yes.
It's still talking, just in a different way.
Yeah. And I think that, I wonder, about playwrights and different people. There's so many of them. And really and truly, there's so many people that are have yet to be recognized and maybe recognized after their death.
There you go.
Right? With what they write.
Yeah.
So I think that I don't know how I feel about saying that my desire is to be recognized. Because that's the tough part, right? Because what you really need to be wanting to do is just create what you're intended to do.
Right.
And I think if your life is a portfolio, that can change.
Right. I also think like the calling might supersede that. Your calling is, I'm gonna go help people. I'm gonna go like help them with their creative journey. I don't need to be recognized. It's kind of like whatever. I think the calling will supersede that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The other day I was sitting in church and they were doing the camera around on the worship team and everything. And all of a sudden I realized we have a new youth minister at our church. And I realized the drummer was our youth minister. And I was like, him was just at my house eating the other day, So I'm watching him and I was like, dang, he's a good drummer. Like he was really getting with it and everything. And so I asked him later, I said, what? And he said, I love to play the drums. Love to play the drums. But his calling is working with young people and teaching people about Christ, right? That's his, but watching him, I was like, he could have played with just about anybody. Just watching him, I was like, you're good.
That is so cool.
And so I think people, I think sometimes people sometimes come to my art studio and they go, "Are you selling art?" And I'm like, "Nah." And they're like, "Why not? Why are you not selling this?" And I said, "Because I give it away to people. I mean, I'm not. This is not. It is a beautiful. I love the work that I do and everything, but it's. I have no need to sell my art.
There you go.
I don't have no need to do that. I would rather give it." Or I've even donated it before for auctions or whatever, for things. But it's a different, that stuff is a little different.
Totally. It's funny because like you said that, and I was talking with Lily and Brody. Brody's off camera, but part of me wants to go into ministry, but I'm just concerned about like, will my relationship with Christ be eroded because I'm going to Him in order for a paycheck, right? And you're over here and you're like, oh, I just give it away. There's no money involved at all with your art. And I think that allows you to just, you don't feel held back, right? Because if you have to make your beeswax something look a certain way in order to be sold. Or you could just make it however you want and just give it away. Like,
it keeps your art form like pure.
Yeah, it keeps the purity of the art form. That's really, that's so,
that's crazy.
I hope that that's true. Right now, the new thing is creating a film. So I've got 2 that I want to do, and now because we have sold our company, that gives me the ability. I'm also 1 degree separation from a number of people who are like the film industry. They're working really hard to bring it to Texas. I'm 1 degree separation from some of those people that are trying to make that happen.
Cool.
I'm 1 degree separation now from people like Mel Gibson, Sylvester Stallone, and John Voight, that I hope to be meeting like in May. And I'm right now working very heavily with someone to help me put my pitch book together, although I think most of it will be a pitch video with me storytelling.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah.
I need to be a fly on the wall.
Because I think that we've altered and changed how we do this, and you do no longer do you have to come with a full screenplay to get something looked at, right? And so I'm praying that God really shows me, because I do think I have storytelling ability, and so I want to be able to not only write it, but my book will be Eve.
Okay.
And I won't give too much away. But
stay tuned for part 2 in a couple of years.
But that beauty
Right.
of creation and that full brain, and that I think that we as women need to remember what it means to be a woman, what it means to be, there is no mother for Eve. I see her and I think of Eve as the ultimate woman. Absolutely. The full brain in use, the intelligence, the ability to understand all the sciences, the ability to teach all of those things, and to live 900 and some odd years is no small feat.
Right.
No.
Right.
And so that is my next undertaking.
There you go. Well,
Is to tell her story.
wow. I think that's a decent place to end it. What do you say?
Yeah.
Can't give too much away.
Yeah, can't give too much away. Well, thank you to Rivers for sponsoring us.
Yes.
Always so grateful for the coffee and just to be able to do it in here. So, and for all the people who decided to make it to the deep end of the video, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one. Deuces.
Bye.